I love your hat, by the way.
I love my
you
hat.
earlier.
My hat is... Look at my hat. My hat is amazing. Give it a lick. Tastes like choppers inside of his mouth because that's where he put it yesterday.
And that's our intro.
Well,
No.
So, we don't ever tell listeners what our podcast is about.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
Ever.
We did that in the first one, I think.
Yeah. Do people usually listen to the first one first?
No.
We probably should tell our listeners what this podcast is about.
So we're getting back into the conversation about having a regular intro then, huh?
Every intro is a conversation about intros.
Pretty much is. Hey, listeners. Welcome to Bias Cover, a podcast where me, Katie Wright, and my brother, Jacob Frederick, pick out books by their covers, read them, and talk about them.
Begrudgingly, sometimes we read them.
Yes. And we don't always read each other's books that we pick. We just decide.
But we always read the books that we pick.
That's true. Whether we regret it or not.
That's true.
Hey, Jake.
Listen to our suffering. Hey, Katie.
We're so glad you're here for our suffering. So, the book today is Icebound.
Okay.
Did you have a picture of the cover?
No.
Okay, let me show it to you. I'll have you describe it.
Andrea Pitzer.
With a Z.
Pitzer.
Oh, there's something on the front that I didn't read before.
Which cover is it? The white one or the blue one?
This one.
The white one. Oh, it's about a boat!
Right.
It's a book about a boat.
It's about a boat.
And the boat stuck in ice.
Listeners, Jake loves boats.
Shipwrecked at the edge of the world. I'm gonna love this book.
I thought that I would love this book. It also says a resonant meditation on human ingenuity, resilience, and hope.
No, I hate it. Is it not about the boat?
It's about being shipwrecked at the edge of the world in the Arctic Circle.
Is it more about people than it is about boats?
It is, yeah.
Son of a bitch.
I mean, the boats are involved heavily in the book.
Okay, then I might listen to what you say.
Okay.
I might listen to this episode.
Are we still doing the thing where you guess what it's about? Or I already gave it away. So.
You get...
Okay.
You can ask me what I think it's about.
Hey, Jake, what do you think this book is about?
Boats.
Okay. And?
Boats.
And more boats.
Yeah, it looks... On the front of it, it's a tall ship.
You don't see the people?
I don't care about them.
But you didn't see them?
I didn't see them because I don't care about them. I saw the boat. I started looking at the boat, trying to gauge like how big it was, what its material, its makeup. It's a wooden ship. It's a tall ship. So I'm thinking like 1800s, maybe early 1900s. And like, you know, it looks like either an exploration or a merchant vessel because there's no like guns on the side of it, right? So they're not really out. They're not whaling. They're not fishing. They could be fishing, actually. I just saw some lines. But it looks more like a vessel that you would want to go fast in. And it has really high walls. So you're probably going to be in rougher seas. I don't see any steel, which is why I don't assume that it's like a modern sort of icebreaker boat.
Yeah.
Right? This is quite possibly one of the first explorations into the Antarctic or the Arctic Circle. So that's sort of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, bingo. So this book is much earlier than 1800.
Okay.
It's based in the 1590s.
But it's a colored picture.
Nobody said that the picture was from then. It could be an artist rendition.
Is it Norwegian? The boat?
Mm-mm. But close.
Okay.
So I don't actually know when the book started. When I started listening to this book, I had a really, really hard time getting into it. Like, exceptionally difficult time getting into this book.
What's it about?
It is about the early explorers trying to... When I say early explorers, it's about the early exploration of the Arctic, which was initially designed. It was initially intended to find a trading route for the people in this book from the Netherlands to China via the northern route. At the same time, there was a lot of exploration around South Africa, trying to get around South Africa to see if they could get to China. And
Cape Horn.
Yep, and these explorers, Barents, actually really thought he could find a way through the Arctic Circle and make it a shorter route.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So 1590s, I think, is when I started paying attention.
Really close to the 1800s.
Really, really close.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, it is close.
Yep. I mean, you're talking about 2,000 years, and I was like 200 off.
Yeah. So there were 3 expeditions that he went on for this, and none of them are considered successful for their original intent.
Cool.
He did not find the route through the Arctic Circle.
But he found gold! Billions and billions of golds!
He found death in a rowboat.
Ooh.
Yeah, on his 3rd voyage on the way back. But he is considered, like, the Barents Sea is named after him.
Wait. I just had some imagery I need to share with listeners. He found death in a rowboat. I'm immediately picturing him in a rowboat rowing across the top of the ice. Backwards. You know, you're just like pulling yourself backwards, right, as you row across the ice.
Slip sliding away
because it's probably more efficient than walking because you can get a little oomph in it, right? And he dies of exposure.
This book was crazy. Once I got into it. So the beginning of the book is really introducing you to all of the people. And not even all. I take that back. It introduced you to Barents and a couple of the other lead explorers or like captains of the ships or something.
Was it the people that were important enough to be written about?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And that time, I don't think there were no names of any of the other guys in there. They're just like, and I'm starting with complaints of this book too early, I think. So let me get through what this book is about.
Were they talking about were they referring to them as their position? The gunwale, the bosun, the deckhands?
Yeah, I guess so. Crewmates.
Crewmates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's written in 3rd person, and it was just very detached from any of the people in the book. Like, it had this, like, really immense detached feeling, so it's hard to... For me, at the beginning, it was hard to understand what this... Like, why do I want to care about any of this?
Was it textbook?
No. It felt like it at first. Yeah. But, you know, she takes you through the history leading up to this great exploration. And I truly zoned out for the first couple things. I'm like, get stuck in the ice. Get to the point where you're stuck in the ice so I can become emotionally invested in this.
Wait.
Okay, let me backtrack. Let me start over.
Wait, no.
You asked me what this book is about, and I haven't given you an answer.
I know, but I like where this is going.
Okay.
So, at the point that you got invested, before that, were they talking about, like, navigation specifics?
No.
Were they talking about the vessel? Were they more like introducing the characters?
Yeah, like introducing the people.
Okay.
I mean, they were really hard to like because the voyages, like, they just, their immediate reaction to everything is to kill.
We just spent 2 episodes
I know.
talking about that shit.
I hated that aspect. It's like they need to find a way to get to this. Right. Polar bear, kill it. That was the first impression. Walrus, try to kill it. Whatever. Like, it's the indigenous people. They need to find a way through. Better go capture one of them. Like, just, I hated that. I hated it so much. And we have spent a couple episodes on this same topic. It's very interesting that it keeps coming back up right now. But the first 2 voyages that he went on, basically what I got out of it was they were trying to find a way through the Arctic. It was dangerous. They killed a lot of stuff. They tried to kill a lot of stuff. They almost killed some people, but didn't. And then they came back. And then they got more funding to try it again. That's what I got out of the beginning of the book.
Nice.
And so at first I really didn't like this book. Like, I think I actually texted you and I was like, Jake,
yep,
this book.
At the same time that I was struggling with the other book.
Yep. So, but then I did get into it. I started like, okay, I'm doing this podcast. I've got to start paying attention to this book. And I did start getting into it. I got past the monotone nature of the narration and the way it was written and all of those things. And I started really trying to like, okay, wait, which guy was Barents? Which guy was the other one? Like, trying to figure it out. So basically on their 3rd voyage, their 3rd attempt to get through the Arctic Circle, they don't make it out before the ice freezes. Like, they get stuck in the Arctic Circle.
Adventure 101.
Yeah.
Resistance.
In 1595 or 6, maybe 97.
Yeah, they were built different back then, so.
They were stuck for 10 months. They lived through polar night, which is where there's absolutely no light. And a lot of them did not survive. But, eventually when it got warm enough, long story short, they rowed their way back into smaller boats because their boat never got unstuck. They rowed their way back all the way, I think I wrote it down, 1,600 miles from Nova Zembla to Kola in Russia.
They rowed?
They rowed.
1,600 miles?
That's what I got out of it, yeah.
What was the current currents?
I don't know. It was in June. They left in June. So let me dive deeper into this story, right? Because, that is like, too long didn't read. They got stuck in Nova Zembla and then waited out winter, tried to survive, really almost didn't. A few of them definitely didn't. Barents died on the way back, and they eventually find Russia rowing in their little boats and come across this guy that they rowed with, that they had a previous voyage with. They split up, and he happened to be there in Russia at the time.
Could you imagine the dockmaster? You row up, and the dockmaster's like, "Ahoy there! Where are you coming from?" And you're like, "I'm dying. I've just rowed 1,600 miles, and I came from the Arctic Circle or Antarctic."
They still had money to. What was crazy was they hadn't burned their money or anything. I guess it was probably coins at that time.
Hard to burn coins, yeah.
Right, hard to burn, but they still had them. They had kept them, and so they paid the Russians for bread.
Wild.
I know. That whole thing, I'm like, they come in, they've got scurvy, they're starving, they are probably emaciated, and the Russians are like, "Oh my gosh, you just, you look so hungry. Do you want some bread? It's 5 cents.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That was wild to me.
Super
when I
amazing.
read that, I was like, they paid for it? That is shocking.
Nowadays, it would have been humanitarian crisis or
right.
helicopters and stuff, and yeah.
Yeah, but at the time, it was still very much. So let's get into this story a little bit deeper.
Tell me more about the boats.
So, I'm just gonna start, I think, with Barents' third voyage, because the first two, I think that I don't know which voyage he discovered Spitsbergen on, but they were basically going around finding stuff, naming it, and keep going. Kind of thing. And it wasn't before this time, there wasn't a lot of exploration for the sake of exploration. They were on this trip to find a route to trade, to make money, to become the wealthy nation of the Netherlands or whatever. But after this, kick-started exploration, and we'll talk about that later. So Barents gets funding. Well, technically, one of his colleagues, I don't know, other ship guys, they get money for the trip, and he is not the captain of this trip. He's the navigator. Mm-hmm. And they take, I think, 2 ships, maybe 9 ships, I don't know, several ships out, and in an effort to do this. And at one point, they get north, and one guy was like, "We need to turn around and go this way," and Barents is like, "I really believe if we go this way, this is the right thing to do." Or not Barents, the other guy that was in charge of the ship. I don't remember. I only remember Barents' name. Everybody else's names are gone.
Joe.
Which I think is how history ended up working.
It's definitely Joe.
Sure. Yeah. That's our usually go-to name.
Or Jed.
Yeah. One of those two. Okay. But anyway, the 2 captains split up. They split up the trip. And they keep going. The crew that we're following is continuing to go up the Arctic Circle, and they're seeing polar bears, and it just feels like they see so many polar bears. That was incredible about this. But shoot polar bear, try to kill a polar bear, almost get killed by a polar bear, over and over again, encounters with the polar bears. So eventually they do get stuck, and it's a really desperate situation. They end up having to abandon the ship and build a cabin. And this is Well, let me ask you, Jake. What do you think of when you think of the Arctic Circle? Like, where is that in your brain?
North.
North of where?
Russia.
North of Russia.
And part of Canada.
Mm-hmm. When I Googled an image of the Arctic Circle to get a better idea of what it was a lot bigger than I thought it was.
It's
it was
huge.
like most of Greenland, a big portion of Canada. Nova Zembla, where they were stuck, was actually in the Arctic Circle. In my brain, I was like, before this book, the Arctic Circle is that little circle on the top
Yeah.
of the world.
You sort of...
And it's above all the countries that we've named.
Yeah, immediately it's like an island of ice.
Right.
Floating around the top. It's where Santa lives, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But in reality, like in the summer, some of the ice melts. And then it ices back up all the way. So it gets bigger and smaller throughout the year. But they get stuck in Nova Zembla, which is like a peninsula thing, kind of. Like it's an outstretched arm, really, it looks like, off at the top of Russia. And they have to build a little cabin. I think that they scrounge for wood. I don't remember if they took some wood from the boat or not, or from the ship. I really don't remember. But it gets really dire, like really fast. That was before, like in the 1590s, there was a lot of scurvy, but they didn't know the cause of scurvy.
Vitamin C deficiency?
Right. So they thought that it was, they thought that if they exercised and stuff, that it might help with the scurvy. Like there were a lot of things that they thought. And I guess like the author compiled all of this information from the things that they wrote while they were there.
I imagine this story is created from journal entries, which is why
Right.
I asked if they were referenced by their position.
Oh,
Because then it would
probably.
be like captain's log type stuff, right?
Yeah. I think it probably was put together from that. So they're in polar winter, and like polar winter is there's no sun for months. I think they were really hoping that somebody would come by and find them or something, and nobody did. And then they're like, okay, we're going to have to try to survive through polar winter. And the polar bears are incredible. Like, the number of polar bears was really fascinating. Like, when I was reading this, at first I was like, they found another polar bear? How many freaking polar bears are there?
I mean, there's like 12 now.
Right. And here in these, it just seems like, I mean, running into a polar bear was almost a daily occurrence.
Dang.
That's how often they ran into polar bears. And they weren't always the same one because they killed a few of them.
Wow.
So that was really, like, at first I was like, stop killing the fucking polar bears. But then I was like, wow, how many polar bears are there versus how many are there today? It was
Right.
very interesting. But the polar bears keep approaching their cabin. Eventually they get snowed in and they have to start exiting through the chimney.
Yeah.
Luckily they have some animal traps. So they start trapping Arctic foxes in order to survive. And they're surviving off like salted meat and things. And I don't know if it was bread or crackers or whatever it is that they brought on the ship, basically, is what they have. Plus whatever they can hunt for. They are very sick by this time. Like most of them have scurvy.
Yeah.
Some of them are dying. They can't go outside to go to the bathroom sometimes because they don't have enough energy to go out, and they're snowed in this little cabin.
They have no fat in their diet.
Right. They keep just digging out the stuff, and they don't have enough, so they're pooping in like one part of the cabin on the floor or something. But they're trapping foxes and eating them, which the author points out that might have actually allowed them to live a little longer, because Arctic foxes are one of the like, we as humans don't synthesize our own vitamin C, but Arctic foxes do.
Oh, so you get vitamin C in there.
So you get vitamin C by eating the foxes.
Nice.
And so that might have, like, given them a little bit of every time they ate a fox, it might have helped them recuperate, like,
One
a little
more
bit.
day.
One more day,
One
right?
fox a day keeps the doctor away. Scurvy away.
It was crazy. It's like Barents is watching the sky he's the navigator in the 1590s, and so he's watching the sky to figure out where they are and, like, what direction they need to go. And that was really interesting to me because I feel like, I mean, I have no knowledge of, like, very, very little knowledge of that. But to imagine having all of this navigational knowledge based on the environment around you is very, very interesting to me. And there's, they're chugging along, trumping along. What's the word? Like tramping, moving forward. They're trudging along.
We've had a conversation about that word. Trudging.
Yes. They are trudging along through polar winter, trying desperately to make it to day. And periodically they come back to the boat, to the ship to see how it's doing, encounter polar bears, almost die. One of them tries to attack. It almost seems like the polar bears are like, what the fuck are you doing? Get out of here.
Yeah, the Polar Bear Council is probably like, oh no, if we let some of these guys on, then they're all going to show up.
Right? It's like this whole, like, get them out. But they are frequently being attacked by very aggressive polar bears. Mm-hmm. I had more sympathy for them by the time that they were stuck in the ice, living in this cabin over polar winter at that point about the bears. Because they can hear the animals walking above them in the cabin because the snow is so high. And so they can see the tracks when they go out to check, their traps and stuff. And, they can tell when foxes are up there and when polar bears are up there. And they basically, like, all start to hide from the polar bear. Mm-hmm. But at the beginning, I didn't have any sympathy for them because their first reaction when they saw a white bear was to try to kill it.
Right.
So there was a beautiful scene in this where they started seeing the sun earlier than they were supposed to, like the hint of daylight. And Barents is like, no, that can't be real. You guys couldn't have seen that because it's at least like 2 or 3 weeks away. There's no way. And they were like, no, we really saw the hint of dawn or whatever. And he's like, okay, you're wrong. And then he sees it like the next day. I wanted to go and read about the science, but what I gathered is that there are ice crystals basically in the air, and that reflects the sunlight from somewhere else and creates like this ice mirage.
Or light mirage.
It's like a light mirage that happens when you're in an icy area where there's a lot of, or it's so cold that there's ice in the air that you can't see. And it creates like kind of like a rainbow. Where you see the rainbow with the light, like it creates an image of something that's actually nowhere near you, like a mirage. And if you're listening and you know the science of that and I messed it up, please let me know because I actually am very, very interested about learning how that really works. But there was a scene I wrote down that I thought was so, so incredibly interesting. There were 3 suns and rainbows. Like they saw, I think they saw full circle rainbows and 3 suns. And it was due to this mirage effect and the reflection of stuff.
My mouth is agape.
Yeah, I wrote, ice crystals frozen in the air create these illusions. I want to read more about it.
Did they take a picture?
It's the 1590s.
Photography was invented in 1589, so, right?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be my next book.
The photography was created around the same time that magic stopped working because magic depends on quantum entropy. Yeah. That's the Dodo, by the way. That's the book Dodo. Anyway.
Okay. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and read them.
Yeah. That's okay. You don't need to. I just told you the whole story.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So while they're in the cabin over polar night trying to survive, they do something. They're trying to preserve their wood in case they need a boat.
Okay.
To leave.
Okay.
And so they have the bright idea to burn the coal from the ship.
Okay.
So I think they go and get some coal, and they're in their little cabin, and they all get super sick and almost die.
I bet.
Because there's not enough ventilation.
Yeah.
Right. And so they don't want to burn the coal again.
Right.
It was amazing. It was before I think we knew what that was, right?
Yeah.
And then, so they are, I don't know if you can imagine the kind of we see the sun now. It's been dark for 3 months or whatever, however long polar night is in Nova Zembla. Mm-hmm. But we see the sun and we are dying for this ship, literally dying for this ship to become unfrozen.
Right.
We're dying to be able to see water anywhere that we look because from where they are, it's all ice.
Right.
And so it becomes brighter, spring comes by, they celebrate some major holidays together still. They are drinking wine, very, very little of it at this time. But at the time, I don't think water was something that you typically drink very much of in the 1500s. Like, it's unsafe. It's not sanitary.
Correct, yeah. Alcohol.
Right. And they're trying to preserve it and not get rid of it. So they see the sun and they're like really like ready. But months go by and the ship is still frozen and they are nowhere near being able to leave. And so in June, like, and I want to say that a mutiny?
Yeah, mutiny.
Was a huge deal. Like on this voyage, before they got stuck in Nova Zembla, there was somebody killed for mutiny either on that voyage or on another one. The punishments were always like really, really severe. And one guy stole something from, I think from indigenous people. It was like a statue or something. And the punishment for stealing on the ship was being tied to the ship and drug underneath the ship from stern to bow. Front to back. What are those?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So from basically underneath the boat and the front to the end. Yeah. He died. He got split in half.
Oh.
For stealing.
Nice.
Yeah. Like the punishments were really, really severe.
Well, it's life or death.
It is. But like for stealing, it was supposed to be one of those like, it wasn't supposed to be a death sentence,
What sliced him in half?
The ice or something.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. It was brutal.
Yeah.
I was like, when I heard that, I was like, whoa. Wasn't expecting that. I expected he froze to death or something.
Yeah.
In the brief period of time that he was in that water. But no, he was split in half, literally.
Darn.
Yep. And Arctic winter there it's typically like, it can get down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit easily. Like it's cold.
Celsius?
I think Fahrenheit. Negative 30 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
I don't know. What's negative 30 Celsius?
I have no idea.
That'd be way more than negative 30 Fahrenheit.
I have no idea. The math is too complicated.
Okay. Yeah, it's something 425 something.
9/5 of plus 32.
So eventually they go and they build, like, I think it was like a rowboat and a scoot. So they have a scoot and then they build another small boat. And I think they're down to 16 or 17 men at this time. And so there's a few in one boat and a few in another, and they row. They find water and they row 1,600 miles to say goodbye to their boat. And then they find Kola in Russia, which is like a little shipping town or something. And at some point they run into Russians who give them bread and stuff and tell them that they haven't actually crossed the major river yet and they still need to keep going. And then they make it to Kona. Barents dies along this trip. And, he's scurvy ridden and probably emaciated.
Yeah.
And then they run into, like, the people in Kola tell them that, like, they go with somebody, like a guide or something, to find the ship. Like, there happens to be a ship from the Netherlands here trading or something. And he takes them there, and it's the captain that split up from them.
Oh.
And they had thought, they of course thought that they were dead because they were gone for 10 months.
Right.
Some very interesting things about this story. Where they were was so inaccessible in general that their cabin was not located until 1871.
Wow.
So it was like 300 years before it was found.
So it must have been a very warm summer.
That year that they found it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another interesting point. Like, the author took a trip to the Arctic Circle, to Nova Zembla, to see the cabin and stuff for research as part of the book. And, I mean, the end of this book was just so sad because that whole thought that I kept having throughout here, like, how are there so many foxes? How are there so many polar bears? How much of this? I'm sure some of them were repeat polar bears, but still way more than we think that there are now. Right. Was like the vibe that I got.
Yeah.
So she went there, and on the way to Nova Zembla, what used to be a totally inaccessible, barren area is now, like, the shoreline is covered in plastic. Like garbage. And she only saw one polar bear the whole trip out there, and she went by sea to kind of get an understanding of the voyage. And then she also connected, they wrote down everything that they saw, and it was kind of like the beginning of scientific exploration for the sake of exploration at that point.
Yeah.
Named a bunch of stuff, you know, colonialism and settlerism and naming and everything's ours kind of thing. But because of his discoveries, in 15 years after this voyage where he discovered Spitsbergen, whaling became a thing. So things like that happened, like the almost destruction of the Atlantic right whale happened as a consequence of discovering that island. Right? And then it started this like discovery, like we can discover things that can make us money and all this stuff. And he hadn't found a way through, he died believing there was a way.
Right.
And then I also looked at, so the plastic was sad, polar bear thing was sad, and she notices like she mentions there's a lot less polar bears than there used to be.
Right.
Their habitat is becoming destroyed by climate change, but she connected his voyage and the discoveries that he made to the eventual destruction of the planet.
Oh, okay.
By 2030, and I don't know if she said this at the end or if I read it after doing research, but by somewhere between 2030 and 2040, there is projected to be no more ice in the Arctic in the summer.
Wow.
At all. And this was like, when you look on the map of where the Arctic Circle is, like when I was trying to figure out where is Nova Zembla and where was his voyage, like I wanted to see it on a map to really understand. I had a hard time finding pictures of the Arctic Circle, but then I found something, I think it was from NOAA or one of those research institutions, of the actual Arctic Circle shrinkage.
Mm-hmm.
And first off, I didn't know how big the Arctic Circle was to begin with.
Right.
But now I'm like, whoa, that's a big, big change.
It's a lot of water.
That's a lot of water. And so it is expected to open up trade routes through the north.
Oh, he was just ahead of his time.
Right, that's what she said. He was just ahead of his time. Like, there is going to be one.
He was a genius that just... he just was born 500 years too soon.
Well, ironically, he created it.
What a great guy.
Like, unintentionally, right? Like, he believed it was there, went on this exploration, found all these discoveries. Humans took advantage of all the wonderful things on our planet, as we do. And now, 500 years later, because of those discoveries, and everything else that happened after that, there will be a path through the Arctic Circle because it won't be there in the summer.
And then we can open up trade routes and make money. And maybe we can kill more whales. And, and we could put more plastic there.
It was insane. And the fact that when they found the cabin in 1871, it was undisturbed.
Wow.
It had never been discovered. It was just as it...
Right.
Just there. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. So it was a very interesting book by the end. At the beginning, I had a hard time getting into it, but I took a lot away from this book, I think.
What about the boat? You didn't talk about the surviving boat or not. Did the boat survive?
The ship?
Yeah.
I think it's still there. Oh, yeah, I think it's still there. I'm not sure about the ship. They didn't free it from the ice. It was stuck there. They abandoned it.
Poor boat.
I know, to row back. But their little boats, they left when they found their friend in Kola.
Yeah.
They left the boats there in the scoot, like the rowboat in the scoot.
Yeah.
For a museum.
Okay.
I think it was called, I wrote it down actually. Oh, I didn't write down the name of the museum. I just wrote.
You did a legit book report on this thing.
Yeah, the boats were left in Russia for a museum in September.
Dang.
Like, that's how long it took them to get to Russia. So they left in June in 2 open boats. They went from Nova Zembla, 1,600 miles to Kola. And then they left the boats in Russia in September. So they were rowing in those boats July, August, and part of September.
How do you even, from a mental fortitude perspective?
I don't know, and it's so freaking cold,
Yeah.
and they weren't prepared. Like, a lot, it was early, she mentioned this in the book, like, it was early on when they were still just killing polar bears for the heck of it, because the first one they wanted to capture and bring back to prove that this exists, and, like, they found this thing. But then they just start killing them for the hell of it, and the meat tastes terrible, and they're also not using, for a long time, they're not using the pelts.
Idiots.
For anything.
You know the luckiest person in this story?
Who?
The one that stole the statue and got split in half.
and didn't have to live through the 10 months of winter.
Shit. Yeah. Nope.
Yeah. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting book. Walruses, polar bears, Arctic foxes.
Yeah.
Really insane themes of colonialism.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
It is, yeah. It was a good story. And I wish that there had been a little bit easier connection with the people in the book.
Yeah.
Like it was doubly hard because they were such asshats at the beginning. You know, like just constant like kill, capture, shoot, can't do anything peacefully.
Human
kind of
stuff.
Bullshit. Yeah. But then, you know, I was just on top of the fact that the book, it was just written very detached from them.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting. Like I would have, when I picked it up, I thought it might be more written more in a memoir style.
Yeah.
Which I really love.
Right.
Like first person something, but it was very much like textbook monotone. Let me deliver this information about these guys that you don't care about right now, and you know, this is the time period they were living in, and what it just read like a history book and that.
Yeah. But
I got into it after a while.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions about this book?
I mean, I think you did. First off, I see your notes, and it's like you did an essay on this book. I didn't expect that at all. So a lot less conversation in this episode.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I have no questions because I think all of my questions were already answered, right?
Yeah.
What do they eat? How do they survive the scurvy? Like all of that other stuff. How do they get there? You had all of it laid out for me, so I don't have any questions about it. I'm really sad that their ship that they left behind didn't get an opportunity at a second life. But I think that's true for a lot of boats.
I think she said the cabin was discovered 300 years later, and then maybe 100 years after that, the ship was discovered.
Yeah, poor
like
ship.
It was that hard to get to where they were.
Yeah, I mean, the guy that got split in half was the lucky one. And I think the primary victim here, besides the Arctic Circle melting, is the ship.
Good takeaway.
Because fuck people.
I feel like we've had like 3 heavy episodes.
I think listeners, this is the last episode where we're going to be talking about hard shit like this.
For a little while, yeah.
For a little while.
We're going to pick fun books.
I think we got to start picking funner books.
Yeah, my next ones are pretty fun.
Yeah, what is our next book?
So our next book is Girlfriend on Mars.
Yeah.
I can't remember who the author is, but ironically we both picked it.
Yes, we did.
Which is kind of funny.
Yeah, this is one of those instances where I had picked the book by its cover and brought it home, and then 3 months later, Katie added it to our spreadsheet of books she wants to read, and I was like, holy crap, I own this book, and I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing that one, and then we'll have some fun ones after that too.
Yeah, I've got some that I picked by their cover, and Lizzie from Samurai Books said these are palate cleansers after I picked them out. So I said, great, because I'm looking for some palate cleansers.
Perfect. So next up is going to be
Girlfriend on Mars.
Girlfriend on Mars.
Yep.
And then after that, I want to do the Z Word. If anybody wants to get ahead and start reading these books now, we're also babysitting the dogs today, too. They're having another play date.
They're having another play date.
You can't fool our listeners. They're smart enough to know.
Another play date. Don't tell them. This is the 3rd play date. Our dogs love each other.
So much.
Yeah, so much.
But yeah, I want to do Z Word after that because that one should be fun too.
Okay.
Cool. All right, get ahead, listeners. Read the book, and we'll see you on the next episode of By Its Cover.
Bye.
Bye.